Let me just start by taking off something which Mr. Bajaj said when he talks about Nehru's antipathy to India. I was just exchanging notes with Mr. Shakti Sinha, and it sounded so much like Babar's comments on India. He wanted to rule India, but he hated India. So that is one.
He just quoted Babar extensively.
Doesn't surprise me. Thankfully, I haven't read too much of Nehru, so I'm clean on that. The other thing I want to take off on is what Mr. Sinha mentioned about when he was growing up in the 60s, and you know what he saw. And none of you guys, and I feel young, I'm old, but I remember my parents talking to me like this, and I always used to say, "What's wrong with you old people?" But I'm going to tell you this: when I was growing up in the 70s, my first memory was India winning the war in 71. That was my first real memory. And when Mr. Modi is something which many people seem to have missed out on. But I think you need to latch on to that one statement of his, which he has made a number of times, at least initially when he was taking over office. When he said that I'm the first Prime Minister who was born in independent India. I think that's extremely important because to me it connotes that he doesn't have that historical or colonial baggage which most of the other people in India have had. And when I look at you guys, because I've seen, we guys still grew up at a time when, you know, TL 480 was still coming in, all sorts of other things were happening, we were being pushed around, or at least we thought we were being pushed around. You guys are growing up at a time when, you know, Indians are going from strength to strength. They're making their mark in their own way. And so the kind of spunk which I see in today's generation gives me a lot of confidence in the future of this country. That is one. The other thing is that, you know, what is important is that when Mr. Modi came into power, the reason why he has managed to do so well on the foreign policy front, at least, even in terms of strategic building up, I think the reason for that is because the impression which he has given, and with good reason, is that he is a man who can deliver. He's a go-getter. Now, you know, it's only your parents who give you a free lunch. In international relations, there's no free lunch. If somebody is relating with you, he is relating for a purpose, and that's it. And in Mr. Modi's case, I think he also realizes that while he has to give him something, he's also going to get something back in return. And that's the game he's playing, which to my mind is what he should be doing. Unlike this whole Nehruvian thing about, you know, being the defenders of all lost causes of the world. I don't see any reason why India should be the defender of all lost causes in the world. Especially when, if Hungary got invaded, we never opened our mouth. Or when Czechoslovakia got invaded, we never opened our mouth. Okay, I could rationalize that because that is the way international relations were being played out at that point of time. But then this kind of moral high standing which used to happen, which at least in this university still happens, you know, that is something which we need to throw out of the window. I think India needs to be in the game of maximizing its own interest. That is the first and foremost. Because until and unless we bother about India's interests, you know, we are not going to be able to deliver to our people. So I think the reason why people are relating to Mr. Modi is because they see him as a guy who is able to, you know, break through the barriers. What I think one of the New York Times reports said, he is the demolisher or the great bulldozer of sorts. Which is what is required, and as Mr. Shakti Sinha talks about, you know, this whole Soviet-style planning. I'm sure Indol is going to talk more on Indian entrepreneurship. But let me just say a thing. You know, and with all due respect to a former IAS officer, or the prospective one sitting out here, no Babu can decide what the market is going to give. You leave it to the Indian businessman. He will make gold out of mud, not necessarily through a wala, but in the right way. You leave it to the Indian businessman. In 1991, when the economic reform started, and it was not because of Manmohan Singh, that's the great myth, because Manmohan Singh was the defender of old Soviet-style planning. And I was in D school those days, and I remember that the man who actually should have got the credit for this was the Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, and if it was anybody else, then it was the IMF and World Bank, which were holding us by our neck and making us do the right thing. They are the ones who deserve the credit. The moment Mr. Manmohan Singh came into his own, all reforms stopped. So now if we really want to engage with the world, and this is going to be the big challenge for Mr. Modi, I think part of the answer we will get to know in the next Kam Kar Do. You tinker around, this story is over. So to my mind, you have to go in for big ticket reforms, give them time to work, and that is what is going to engage with the rest of the world. And I think Mr. Modi has done that. Now, what he has done really is, he has, the other thing is, he's a damn lucky guy. He comes into office and oil prices fall from $100, $110 a barrel to $50 a barrel. And like Napoleon said, I would rather have a lucky general than a brilliant one. So I would rather have a lucky Prime Minister than an unlucky guy, who might be very brilliant, doesn't matter, but the lucky guy is good for me. So I think what Mr. Modi needs to do is, and he's got this opportunity, he's got that space, and I think that's what he probably is going to be aiming at. He needs to marry the growing strategic profile of India with the growing economic interest in India. And this kind of a synergy between strategy and economics is the way Indian foreign policy has to proceed if it really has to leave a mark, and make a big difference in how this country relates to the rest of the world. So I think Mr. Modi has at least given this indication that for him economics is the key issue. Which is why when you see the Americans or the Russians or for that matter the Chinese, the Australians, the Japanese tying up with India, it's not because they've suddenly fallen in love with us. That's not the way international relations work. They are relating with us because they see both a strategic and an economic dimension in building up their relationship with India. In terms of what he's trying to do, I think on the very first occasion, when he invited all the SAARC leaders, I think he played a master stroke. Because with one play of the hand, this whole spectre which had been created by the so-called intellectuals which Mr. Bajaj was talking about, those 40, 50 of them, one doesn't know where they are anymore. And many of them incidentally are, with all due respect to somebody's caste affiliations, they are what I call the genuine Rajputs, Jiska Raj, Uske Poot. So they are going to be coming, and some of them are actually making a beeline to this government. So much for their secular pretensions. Incidentally, let me make this thing very clear. India cannot but be a secular state if it has to survive as a modern nation state. There is no other option, otherwise you end up as a Pakistan. And nobody wants to be that. So India needs to be a secular state. Rules and regulations need to be on secular principles. That's notwithstanding, the revival of our cultural traditions and other things. But insofar as the state is concerned, I believe it must be a secular state. And to Mr. Modi's credit, while he was running Gujarat, I don't think anybody could really point out that he had taken governmental decisions on anything other than secular principles. And that is the way to good governance. But having said that, I think what he did was that when he played that first card by inviting all India's neighbors for his swearing in, the message which he gave was, he actually punctured that balloon which was being created about him, that here is this guy who's this blood-spewing fanatic who has come into power in India. I think he blew that balloon off. And the dividend was that today, when you take a bit of a tough line with the Pakistanis, and people say that you need to start talking to them, I think he has built up a fairly good case where he says that, look, I was the guy who took the initiative by calling these guys. I'm more than willing to engage with them, but I'm not going to engage with them if they have a gun pointed at my head. Nor am I going to engage with them if they have a gun pointed at their own head. Because that's how the Pakistanis normally negotiate with the world. Initially, they'll put a gun to your head. If you don't succumb to the blackmail, then they'll put a gun to their own head. And I don't think Mr. Modi is in the game of buying that. But what he did was, with his first tour to Bhutan and then Nepal, I think he conveyed the importance of the neighborhood, both from the point of view of India's security, as well as the point of view of the growth of the subcontinent. I think his effort to make them partners in India's developmental process is unexceptionable. I don't think anybody can really hold a quibble on that score. As a result, he's also started getting reciprocation from them. The important thing for him to do would be, and this I think in some ways is the one big problem before I come to some of the other issues. The big problem which Mr. Modi is going to face insofar as making policy is concerned is, ironically enough, the standpoint which his own party had taken when it was in opposition. So basically what he has to now do is, he has to make U-turns from all those positions and, to my mind, desultory positions which the BJP had taken when they were in opposition. Absolutely stupid things to do. The job of the opposition is to make sure that the government does the right thing. It's not to force the government into positions which are unsustainable, and the nuclear liability bill is one such thing. A number of other issues. I think what the BJP did was that if the Congress party was becoming fiscally irresponsible on issues, the BJP wanted them to go them a couple of levels higher in terms of fiscal responsibility, whether it was on the food security bill or a whole lot of other things. Now that they are in government, they have to turn that whole thing around. So I think, and I say this in relation to Bangladesh, for example, that land deal which had been worked out is something which the BJP should have backed. It's in our interest. It's in our interest. Both because it's a long-standing issue and it's a silly issue that we are just quibbling about unnecessarily. But more importantly, we have a government in Bangladesh, the Awami League government of Sheikh Hasina, which has done practically everything we could have asked of any government in terms of our security concerns. They have delivered much more than what we could have expected from them. So we need to give them what will bolster her own position in our own country, whether it's on the Teesta waters, which again was a botched thing by the former NSA and the Prime Minister. They should have taken Mamata Banerjee with all her idiosyncrasies. They should have tried to take her on board. And if she had not listened to them, they should have still signed the deal. It was well within their right to sign that deal. That is something which Mr. Modi needs to push through. Also the land deal with Bangladesh. I think that will go a very long way in addressing one of the important security concerns. My own sense is that they are planning to push that thing through, but the sooner they do it, the better it is. Because that will give Sheikh Hasina a very strong footing in her own country. And I think that's the game we need to start playing. India should not only be respected, but it should also be feared. This whole business that I wish you would respect me, nobody respects you just like that if you don't have some nuisance value. So I think that nuisance value is extremely important, that strong arm is extremely important, that you don't trifle with my interests. And I don't know how true those reports are about the Sri Lankan elections. I hope they are true. But the fact that, even if those reports are not true, probably they're not, probably they're a little far-fetched. But the thing is, just the very fact that that report has come out actually works in our favor, because the impression which goes on in many of these countries is that the RAW, which I personally think is a bit of a defunct organization, actually is doing great stuff. Agent Vinod is only in the films. Ek Tha Tiger only happens in films. I'm not quite sure if it happens in real life. But I hope it did. Nevertheless, the point is that the impression which goes is that here are these guys who are ready to play hardball. Now this hardball is not only with, the smaller neighbors, which we are also, it's not just hardball, it's just not that mindlessness, that bloody mindedness that look, you do this, otherwise this. It's, that is backed with a lot of, making them partners in a developmental process, giving in to them on some of their concerns. I think that's the way this whole thing has to be played. I touched Pakistan right in the end, Pakistan and Afghanistan. But let me just say, on this hardball business, China, for example. Now, China, personally, we have a problem with the Chinese. But I don't think the Chinese, I don't consider them to be, in a manner of speaking, a civilizational threat to India. We've never had that kind of a conflict with them. In fact, we've hardly ever had a conflict with them, except for this border dispute, over which, in some ways, I think we had a time when we could have struck a deal. We were not interested. The Chinese were interested at one point of time. That never happened. But even our case is not as strong as we make it out to be. But nevertheless, the point is that these are now national positions and these are negotiable positions. We need to start on that, and that is what these guys have started doing. But the important thing is, and I don't know how many of you guys put two and two together, on the day Sushma Swaraj goes to China, India tests the Agni 5. Now, this is what the Chinese used to do to us. We never used to do this kind of stuff. On the day the Chinese president comes to India and Mr. Modi fakes him out here, goes out of his way, the Chinese do an encroachment to give us a signal, and the way the government responds, that okay fine, I'll engage with you, I'll feed you Dokla and Tekla and whatever else. But what you are doing on the border, I will answer you out there, if that's the game you want to play. I think the messaging which these guys have got is pretty good. It's pretty good. And I'm quite sure that the Chinese would have got that message. What surprises me is that no Indian newspaper or security analyst has actually written that how well timed the Agni 5 missile test was with Sushma Swaraj's visit. But that it was. But more importantly, the way they played the whole Obama visit and the linking up with, the reaching out to Japan, the reaching out to Australia, and to the US most of all, and then using that as a leverage to send signals to the Chinese. Now this is not as easy as it sounds, and as we go along, this is a very complicated game. But the thing is that you can either play this game, or you can sit on the sidelines and watch the others play these games with you. And I think that is the good thing about these guys, that they are willing to move forward, they're willing to step out. Of course they'll make mistakes, of course there'll be snafus, of course there'll be all sorts of other things, but like a good wizened bureaucrat will tell you, the easiest way to not make a mistake is not do anything. If you don't do anything, you don't make a mistake. So the thing is, here are these guys who are trying new things. They're trying to break through this logjam in which India had been caught, this kind of a, this South Asian kind of a bind in which we had been caught. Of course, we are South Asians. This is our area of play. But, and frankly, I get really pissed off with this talk of India being the great power, emerging superpower. We are nowhere. We are a middling power. We are not insignificant, but we are also not very significant. We need to reach that point where we become a significant player. So, and that requires a lot of hard work. So the point is that that diplomatic game this government is started playing. So they'll do the counterbalancing. For example, the Chinese, they'll try and counterbalance with the Americans, and yet use that to get something out of the Chinese. The Chinese will need to address our concerns if they don't want us to. They don't want to see us go a little too far in the American embrace. The Americans, to attract us and not see us go back to the Chinese, will also need to play ball. And I think that tango will go on. Where the equilibrium is reached, it's difficult to say at this point of time. But what these guys have now done is that they have given this thing a push. That push has been given. They've brought this ship to the takeoff stage. Now, whether this ship takes off or not, or this plane takes off or not, will depend on the kind of hard work which needs to be done inside India. And which is why I said that part of the answer we should get in the next couple of weeks when the budget comes out, because that's the economic policy statement. I'm not talking about the allocation which they gave 100 crores here or 200 crores there. That's not important. It's the policy framework which you are going to form, which is going to give that message of whether we are ready to go to the next level or not. Otherwise, I'm afraid it will be a bit of a setback. Just as the last budget was, always the last budget, one could have said that, look, these guys are just about a month and a half in office. The mess left behind by the great economist and the rest of the Chalis Chor is just too horrendous to manage. So they will need to do a lot of heavy lifting right now. I hope they are up to the job. One more thing, this whole business of consent, many of you guys are probably from SIS and you'll hear this trite observation by most people, consensus in foreign policy. If you have 300 plus seats, you have a consensus in foreign policy. I never think Mr. Nehru ever asked anybody else whether they actually agreed with his foreign policy or not. He thought he was the great foreign policy, he was some kind of a Metternich or some kind of a Clausewitz and he'll form the foreign policy. He never, where was the consensus in foreign policy? So, this whole business of consensus in foreign policy is a load of nonsense. You have 300 plus seats, you can push a policy, you have the consensus on foreign policy. As simple as that. Right? The other thing, which again I think I need to mention, we deal with Israel. We have very important interests attached to Israel. A lot of it in the field of defense and security. But I wish we would do more business with the Israelis, although I think it would be nice to see the Indian Banya deal with the Israeli Jew and how they both manage to make money. I think that would be a great sign. But the thing is that the kind of important interest that we have attached to Israel, you look at the cavalier way in which the previous government treated Israel. At the time of Kargil, and Mr. Sinha will probably bear me out, we ran short of ammunition. Who were the guys who supplied it to us? A range of issues. Who were the guys who were helping us out? It was the Israelis. And we never even wanted to meet them. And I think this time, when Mr. Modi went to New York, the very fact that he made sure that he went and met the Israeli Prime Minister, I think that is a very important signal. Now again, here again he will have to play that game. We have very important interests attached to the Arab world, so we will need to stay engaged with the Arab world. But the question is that if the Arabs, for their own reasons, many of the Sunni Arab states have very close links with Israel, but behind the scenes. If they can be dealing with Israel, what prevents us from dealing with Israel? So we will need to play that game, And this whole business of constantly, this defender of lost causes, that Hamas might do whatever, spread whatever terrorism it wants to spread, but the so-called pseudo-liberals in India or rest of the world, will do a lot of breast beating about Israel's retaliatory action. The point is that Israel is doing what it thinks it needs to do to protect itself. Rightly or wrongly, that's what they are doing. If the Hamas does not want this to happen, then they should change the ways they are doing things. So this thing that we go to the UN Human Rights Council and then as a reflex vote against Israel is again something which probably is going to end starting now. It should have. I was very disappointed when we voted against Israel at the UNHRC. Ideally, we could have abstained, but we decided we will not. Why? And the reason was because that was a reflex action, the knee-jerk thing. I think that's also going to end now. Finally, let me come to my favorite country, which is right across the border. The problem is, let me go to one removed, Afghanistan. I have 5 minutes. Afghanistan, we played very badly in the last round. We screwed up big time. The Afghans wanted us to be very closely involved. Partly we messed up. It was of our doing. partly it was the Americans or the Europeans or whoever, because they didn't want us to do certain things because they thought that it would spook the Pakistan. Now I find it, I'm confounded by this logic in the Indian establishment of the past, that we are going to worry about Pakistan's sensitivities. My question is, when has Pakistan ever bothered about our sensitivities? This is a game which both sides need to play, otherwise it's not a game. Otherwise it's a mug's game, which is what we played. So even when the Afghans wanted us to be very closely involved in their security and defense preparedness, we were reluctant to play ball. They kept asking us for equipment, all sorts of other things, which, had we played that game, we could have tied in the Afghans a lot more closer to us than what we did. But we lost that game. And the new president who has come, has taken this call. My mind, he's making a big mistake, and I don't have the time, otherwise I would have gone into details why I think he's making a big mistake, of casting his lot with the Pakistanis and with the Chinese and others. I don't think he's going to get anything out of it. I think at the end of the day, he's going to end up as another Najibullah, if not worse. But the point is, so as of now, we don't have much of a play left in Afghanistan because you have what I would consider to be a bit of a hostile government. But Afghanistan, is a place where things keep changing all the time. And that's the beauty of Afghanistan. So you might be out of the race today, a couple of years down the line, circumstances will evolve where you will again get a entry into that game. So I think we should bide our time. Masterly inactivity might be the way to go rather than a front policy right now, and then maybe we can have a front policy later on. About Pakistan, I think this government has done, seems to have worked out some of its play. I'm not sure if they've worked out all of it, and I'm not very sure if they have thought through the entire thing. But one thing is very clear, that some of the old established and rather stupid rules of the game are changed. So like the Prime Minister or to that matter the Finance Minister mentioned, that if Pakistan wants to talk to people who want to break up India, then what is the point of talking to Pakistan? So I think some of the red lines are being set with Pakistan. They need to learn whether they want to stay with it or not. The problem I fear is, and this is an old Indian withdrawal symptom, that you make a certain policy or you put in place a certain policy, and then you, after 3 months, 6 months, and I blame Mr. Sinha's previous boss also for this. Because this is a congenital Indian problem, there is nothing to do with Prime Minister to Prime Minister. This is a congenital problem that we start getting withdrawal symptoms that we're not talking to the Pakistani. So the other day I was on one of the television channels and somebody asked me that, look, for about a year and a half there's been no dialogue with the Pakistanis, so that policy has failed. I said, and my point point is that if you have now put in place a new policy parameters you put in place, then whether it takes 5 years, it takes 10 years, it takes 50 years, you let that policy play its course. This is not instant coffee that every 3 months you need to change it. And nor is this 24-hour television that it has a running cycle. You have to let it play itself out. This is a war both of attrition and this is a war of patience. Who has the staying power? So we have to show that we have the staying power. Now that is something, if anybody was to care to listen to me, that is my suggestion to them. The other thing is that on a more tactical plane, these guys seem to have worked out how they will respond to any Pakistani provocation. So if there is, say, firing on the LOC, they've worked out what the response will be. They'll keep it limited into a couple of sectors, but they'll fire back a lot more than what they are getting. If there is something else, then they've worked it all out. What they might not have worked out is what do you do when you have something like the Fidayeen attack in Uri, or you have some other terrorist attack, which is not exactly a Mumbai, but it's also not something which you can ignore. What's your play at that point of time? So I don't think the playbook is ready on that as of now. And the other thing which I'm not entirely convinced of is whether they have thought through where they want to take this policy with Pakistan. What are the other things they're going to put in place to make sure that they can force some kind of compellence on Pakistan? I'm not very sure if they've worked that out, but I suppose in about 8 months, whatever they managed to do is pretty good to my mind. Would say I've more or less covered everything. I look forward to some of the questions if you guys have. Thanks.